Hello and welcome back to my channel. This is the 16th episode of my knitting podcast, and today we're going to be covering my knitting projects from basically the beginning of 2026, so all through what I knitted this past month of January. We've got quite a few things to go through today. I've got 2 finished objects and 3 works in progresses, as well as quite a few acquisitions, which you could probably see from behind me. There's quite a lot of, so let's go right into it. So there will be quite a lot to go through today. And before I jump in, let me just mention what I'm wearing today, which is the porcelain sweater, my second one of it actually, that I knitted I finished it in September last year, but it took me about a year to finish it because I had a few other projects going on at the same time. This is knitted in Tin Piergin by Sanis Garn and Phil Colana Tidia as well, and this is one of my favorite projects to date. I think I called it my heirloom project because I hope I will pass it down to my children and it will be cherished by them as well. I also wanted to mention that we've reached over 2,000 subscribers in this channel and I could not be happier. So thank you so much for watching my content and leaving me some really nice comments in my videos in the past. And there will be a very, very small giveaway at the end of the video, so make sure you watch until the end if you're interested in that. So let's get right into it. The first finished object I'm going to present today is my sweater number 23. Viewers might know, if you've watched some of my old podcast videos, that this has been going on for quite some time. In fact, I checked the start date on this project and it was actually March last year. So it took me nearly like 9 or 10 months to finish this project. And I've got to say that overall I'm quite happy with it, but I've got some qualms with it, which I'll go through. First, talking about the yarn and then the pattern itself. So the yarn I don't have with me anymore because I sold the last hank of yarn I had left over on Vinted, but it was Hjelholt Ulspinderi Handvarsk yarn, which is apparently a blend of merino and Gotland wool. This is one of my gripes with this yarn. You really can't feel like, I find it a bit itchy. I find it quite a bit itchy. In fact, it's the itchiest jumper in my wardrobe. But yeah, I think the mix of those wools actually gives it a really lovely sheen and fluffiness that looks almost like you held mohair with this jumper. So you can get the mohair look without having to hold any mohair, which is something that the yarn shop sales assistant had told me when I bought this yarn. So Handvarsk yarn is a Danish wool from a Danish wool milling company that apparently has existed in the same family for 4 generations. So the history of the yarn is very nice, and it was especially nice because I bought this yarn in Denmark when I was in Copenhagen for a conference. I literally went to that conference with half my suitcase empty so I could bring back some yarn. The memory of this yarn and kind of the souvenir aspect of it is very nice. But I have to say that I am struggling a bit with the itchiness of this yarn. It's fine on a day-to-day basis, but for example, the other day I was wearing this jumper whilst I was knitting, and like when you're knitting, you're doing some like micro movements with your arm, and so it just started itching way too much around the underside of my arm and like just like the inside of my body here. And so yeah, I've discovered that basically I can't knit whilst wearing this jumper, but nevertheless I've still managed to wear a few times. I just have to make sure that, like, I always wear a t-shirt underneath any jumper that I wear, but for this jumper in particular I have to be a bit careful with what type of t-shirt I wear. So if the material is too thin, it starts becoming quite a bit itchy, so I have to wear quite a heavyweight kind of 100% thick cotton t-shirt. And I also prefer wearing a t-shirt that's quite high, like crew neck, rather than a v-neck, just to avoid the irritation of the yarn against my neck area. The color of it is just a marine blue color. Can't remember the number of it, but there's only one blue like this in their color range, I believe. I bought this yarn in the shop called Udestedt, which is in central Copenhagen. They sell a lot of Gepard yarn, but they also sold Handvarsk yarn, and that's why I specifically went to that shop. I also know that you can buy it from the shop called Sommerflugen, which is also in Copenhagen, but you can't find this yarn in any UK yarn store. So I think that's why when I put the remaining hank I had of this on my Vinted account, it sold really quickly as soon as I put it up on my Vinted, because it's really kind of difficult to find in the UK, I believe. The yarn was also quite difficult to work with. It's very rustic, and so like the knitting process was not smooth at all, and I feel like I had to pull on the yarn a lot, so my fingers would cramp up a bit when I was knitting with this yarn. It has blocked beautifully, and it's like much softer to the touch now, and also like it's got a lovely drape now that it's blocked. But yeah, it's still kind of slightly difficult to use. I'm glad I tried out this yarn. Will not be buying again. I think that's pretty much my conclusion from this experience. So the pattern itself, the pattern is sweater number 23 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. It's actually only my third time knitting up a pattern from My Favorite Things Knitwear. I've knit camisole number 5, sweater number 9, which are probably her two most famous patterns. The hand varix yarn is actually one of the recommended yarns for this pattern, so which is kind of one of the reasons why I ended up with this. I also kind of realized that I had never knitted just a basic drop shoulder construction crew neck jumper, and so I thought this would be a really good kind of staple to have in my wardrobe. And I do think it is. Like, I really enjoyed the look of this jumper. It's just like a super simple oversized crew neck jumper, and I feel like you always need a jumper like that in your wardrobe. It's got these lovely details of the drop shoulder construction where you do like these rapid increases along the sloped edges here to construct the drop shoulder, and some really lovely details with the increases for the neck as well. I mentioned in a previous podcast episode that I struggled quite a bit with the sizing of the sleeve, like armhole depth here. I thought it looked quite small, and especially the number of stitches that she was recommending you pick up would end up resulting in me picking up 1 stitch every 2 rows, which seems way too much of a drastic pickup rate. So I kind of went with my own gut feeling of just looking at the gauge, my row gauge, versus my horizontal stitch gauge, and I kind of figured out that my ratio should be more 3 stitches out of 4 rows when picking up on the vertical edges for the armhole here for the sleeves. And so I obviously ended up with more stitches for the sleeves, but I adjusted for that by just tapering my sleeves a little bit by doing 5 rounds of decreases, so that my cuff size still ended up being the right size for the size that I picked, which was size S. This jumper has quite a bit of positive ease. I think mine ended up being 120 centimeters bust circumference, so that's about 31 centimeters of positive ease on me, which is exactly what I wanted, so I'm quite happy with that. And yeah, overall the pattern was very easy to follow despite the slight issue of this sleeve increase being a bit weird. Otherwise super easy to follow. I did make it quite a bit longer, I think, than on the body than what she was recommending. I think My Favorite Things Knitwear's measurements recommended more of a cropped look, and I wanted to be like a nice baggy oversized comfy jumper, so I didn't want that cropped look. And also, the yarn she suggested, the yarn amount that she suggested was 5 hanks of the hand varix yarn, which I used exactly. I basically could have done the jumper a little bit longer, but I did not want to dive into my 6 hank of yarn. And so at some point it ended up at the body ribbing, and I actually ran out of my 5th hank. And so I undid my gauge swatch to basically finish off the ribbing and do the Italian bind off. And so yeah, I got away with exactly 5 hanks of yarn for this project, and so I was able to sell my 6 hank of yarn on Vinted, which I didn't know it was a thing at all. I'm now seeing quite a bit of yarn being sold like secondhand on Vinted, and so I've also sold another sort of quantity of knitting folded heavy merino, which just wasn't my color, and I just had to kind of face that fact. And so I decided to sell it on Vinted there as well, and also sold really quickly. So if you're interested in like maybe finding a new home for the yarns that you don't use, or like leftovers that you have, then Vinted might be a good idea for you, just as well for finding good deals for yarn as well. I've seen some really good prices on Vinted for sweater quantities or summer top quantities of yarn over there. So this was my sweater number 23. I managed to wear it yesterday at National Trust Anglesey Abbey to look at the snowdrops. So the snowdrops are like little white flowers that basically bloom around this time of the year, and Anglesey Abbey is apparently quite famous for having loads of them, and it was indeed very beautiful. And I managed to wear this jumper. I coordinated it with my second finished object for today, which is my red cashmere scarf. These two projects I was working on whilst I was doing my week in the life as a PhD student slash knitter vlog 2 or 3 weeks ago. And so if you watched that video, you might have seen that I had made like quite a good bit of progress on these projects, and since then I finished them off. And so this is my red cashmere scarf. It's so delightful, you guys. The yarn I used for it, I have it here. The yarn I used for it is this recycled yarn called Green Cashmere by Save the Yarn, and it's a company that's based in Basel in Switzerland, and I picked up this yarn when I was in Basel a year and a bit ago, and I basically grabbed, I think, 11 or 12 balls of this to make a set of penny gloves, red scarf, and Oslo hat. And so now I'm 2 out of 3 projects done from this purchase. So the penny gloves I've already shown in the podcast before, I believe, and this is the matching, just kind of very basic tubular scarf. I didn't follow any pattern for this scarf. I literally just basically calculated the width that I wanted for my scarf, which I think was about 18 centimeters, 20 centimeters. I looked at my gauge on my penny gloves and then I converted that into a stitch count, but doubled because it will be a tube basically. And so the whole circumference of it, if I want to set the scarf to be 18 centimeters wide, this would be 36 centimeters of whole circumference, which I converted to my stitch count. So I think I ended up casting on like 90 stitches or something like that. I first did 1 round of purling, and then I continued with stockinette in the round all the way until I reached about the length of my height. So I'm 161 centimeters tall. And I knew that with blocking, this will grow massively. And in fact, now it's like 180 centimeters long, this thing, which is perfect for a scarf, because then I can wrap it around like this. So just kind of how I usually knot my scarves, or I can also wrap it around this way. And I think, in fact, I can do this twice if I'm willing to have the tails to be a bit short like this. So this is incredibly soft because, I mean, it's 100% cashmere. This Save the Yarn cashmere is actually such a good deal because it's a bit cheaper than, say, Cardiff Cashmere Classic, but exactly the same properties basically. So it's 25 grams and 125 meters per ball. It's so delightfully soft. It bloomed beautifully with blocking. I actually blocked this in the delicate wool washing setting on my washing machine without any problem whatsoever. Just from like the sheer amount of like fabric in this, I thought it would be better if it went through a spin cycle so it would dry quicker, and also because I wanted to wear this scarf as soon as possible. I didn't even pin block this scarf when it was out of the washing machine. I literally just let it hang from the clothes drying rack so that the weight of it will slightly pull and make the scarf a little bit longer, because when it was my height, so like 161 centimeters before blocking, it was a little bit short. Like when doing this, maybe the tail came to like here basically. So yeah, it basically grew about 20 centimeters, this much, with blocking, which is crazy. But the blocking also made the stockinette so even and just like kind of looks like it was machine made, which is amazing. So I'm a big fan of this yarn, and I'm very excited to cast on the Oslo hat with the same yarn. So I have 3 balls of this stuff left, and I've seen a few Oslo hat projects on Ravelry that used Cardiff Cashmere, which has the same length as this, and people tended to usually use 2.5 balls for their Oslo hats. So I think 3 balls of this will be more than enough, and yeah, very excited to cast that on at some point soon. Although I feel like even if I were to cast on now, winter here has been quite warm. I mean, we're already reaching like 10 degrees max throughout the day, so that's too warm to be wearing a hat, at least for myself. So yeah, the hat might not be happening this winter season, but I'm wearing this scarf loads already. It's been about a week since I've had it now, washed and dried, and I've been wearing it pretty much every day. So super happy with this, and I am so happy that I kind of like pushed through, because I used to dread the idea of making a scarf because it's just a really long process. You have to knit in the round for so long, but it ended up just kind of happening by just forcing myself to pick up the needles. Also, it was a great travel project because, you know, stocking it in the round, you really don't have to think about it twice, and so it was just easy to travel with this project and just knit on it whenever I had time. And also making making that, you know, vlog about a week in my life really motivated me to just pick up this project and knit on it more. And so by the time I reached the end of that vlog, I had already done about like 20 centimeters of progress. I feel like the combination of this jumper and this scarf is really cute. There's like something about a really dark blue and like a red like this that's so cute. I also find the red is like a perfect shade of red. I love this so much. And it looks really cute when I'm wearing my matching penny gloves as well. Okay, let's move on to works in progress now. I'm gonna start with maybe the more exciting one, and that's the Sirena Sweater by Cookie the Knitter. So this is so scrumptious, so beautiful with the cables. If you've watched my autumn winter knitting plans for this year, you might have seen that this is one of the projects that I absolutely wanted to cast on at some point this season. And so when I finished my sweater number 23, I was like, okay, time to cast on a new project now that I've cast off an old project. And so I decided to cast this on. So this is knitted in the Rerum Natura Juliette. And the color, oops, sorry, there's a bit of fluff. This is in the color Poivre Blanc, which is like this perfect greige. It's basically Juliette comes in these 4 natural colors and then dyed colors. There's a really large range of dyed colors in this yarn, but there's also 4 of them that are just the natural fleece color of the wool. I think you've got one that's called Sel, which is just the white. And then this is a Poivre Blanc, which is like the second lightest shade. So it's mostly the beige fleece with a bit of the brown fleece mixed into it. And then you've got Poivre et Sel, which is kind of a mix of the two, but more leaning towards the brown than the white. And then you've got Poivre, which is like a full-blown brown fleece wool. And I think that's like pretty much 100% of it is the brown fleece. Whereas Sel would be 100% of the white fleece, I believe. So yeah, there's 4 shades of these natural fibers and it's super pretty. So Poivre Blanc I picked up in Little Weasel in Paris, which is a really lovely yarn shop in Arcade. And anyone who's been to Paris probably has heard about that shop. And they've got a good selection of yarn, including the Rerum Natura. And so when I was there, I really wanted to pick up yarn from France in a French shop because I like to pick up local yarn whenever I'm traveling. And so yeah, I had heard really good stuff about the Rerum Natura, so I really wanted to try it out. I didn't have any specific patterns in mind when I bought it, but I think I was already thinking cables would lend themselves really well to this kind of yarn because it's like, I don't know if you call it worsted spun, but it's really like plump, and so the cables show up really beautifully with a lot of definition. And so it's been a really enjoyable experience knitting with this yarn, and I will definitely pick up more of it in the future. The yarn is 125 meters per 50 grams, but this is a ball of 100 grams. You get 250 meters of it in a ball, and it's 100% merino wool. Some of it comes from Arles, which is really close to where my family is from in France, and some of it comes from Portugal. Let's talk more about the Sirena Sweater pattern. It's a very beautiful cable jumper that kind of reminds me of the Rory Gilmore sweater in this first episode of Gilmore Girls. A lot of people knit this jumper, I think, inspired by the Rory Gilmore jumper. And so yeah, it's got these beautiful diamond shapings in the center of the back and the front, and then it's framed by these lovely sets of cables. And I think the fact that you've got different kinds of cables all throughout, it actually makes this project quite exciting and very engaging. And lately I've been struggling with the fact that I'm clearly addicted to my phone. And so even when I'm knitting, which is supposed to be kind of like a mindless or mindful activity for my brain, I always end up having like my phone up watching some video or like Netflix or something. And I've been trying to kind of reduce my screen time lately. And a project like this is great for that because it's so engaging with the cables. Not in like it needs my full attention, but just it's very kind of fun to knit on. And so it's been like really good making me just like fully kind of concentrate on this and kind of be fully engaged with the activity that I'm doing and this hobby that is knitting, and not pick up my phone at all, and not even want to pick up my phone because like, yeah, it's just occupying my brain and kind of stimulating my brain in a really nice way when I'm knitting on this project. The construction of the Sirena Sweater is quite a classic one. It's very similar to the Moby sweater where you've got to cast on like the whole length whole width of the body, but then you cut the yarn, you start in the middle, and then you start doing short rows to shape the shoulder slopes like this. And so I'm only 2 rows away from finishing the back yoke, which might seem a bit surprising given how shallow it is so far, like the armhole, but I think it's because you knit quite a bit of length here when you are knitting the shoulders on both sides before you start doing the shaping for the neck, so that the bit that kind of folds over your shoulder. Like if there's going to be quite a bit of length here before you start doing the neck hole shaping, then that means your armhole still be wide enough. The pattern I think says that the sleeves have at least a circumference of like 45 centimeters, so that's about the usual 20 to 25 centimeters of armhole depth, at least the ones that I'm used to seeing in pattern. Anyway, all this to say that I actually cast this on last week. So yeah, it's quite a bit of progress. I'm quite happy with that, and it's been so delightful knitting on cable projects again. This is only my second cabled knit project. I'm knitting this project on 5mm needles, and the pattern actually says to knit on 5.5. I decided to go down a needle size because I think my yarn is technically slightly too thin for this project. I believe the pattern's original or recommended yarn holds a yarn of the same thickness as this one, held with a lace weight yarn. My Sirena Natural Juliette is a little bit too thin for this. That's why I decided to go down a needle size, because I knit some gauge swatches first with the 5.5mm needles. The gauge swatch is so fun to do, by the way, and the pattern comes for a chart for the gauge swatch, which is great. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed having this chart for the gauge swatch because it makes all the guesswork disappear. You just knit the chart and then you're good to go. And so it was actually a really good way of practicing also how to knit the cables without a cable needle, which I hadn't done before. And so when I knit this swatch with 5.5mm needles, I felt like it was a little bit like floppy and maybe a bit too loose of a fabric, not dense enough. And so I tried with 5.5, and I feel like you can already tell from the way the fabrics behave that this one just is a bit denser and has a bit more structure. And so I decided to go ahead with the 5mm needles. I actually did meet gauge with 5mm anyway, just by pulling a little bit on it, but I'm sure it will still kind of end up a little bit smaller than the pattern would with the right gauge. And so I decided to knit a size large, which is 120 centimeters of circumference, but I bet it will turn around to about 118 or something like that. Basically, could have done with a size M, decided to go with an L just to account for the fact that my gauge is probably a little bit smaller than intended. I managed to meet gauge on this 5mm swatch, but it was with a little bit of stretching and also drying the gauge swatch against my radiator, which is not how I would dry my jumper. So I think like the heat obviously kind of made it hold its shape a bit more, but that's not how I would gauge. That's not how I would wet block my jumper, and so I assumed that it would turn out a little bit smaller if I were to knit with this set of 5mm needles. So yeah, all this to say, I went for a size L with hoping that I end up somewhere between size M and L with 5mm needles. My next work in progress is actually the PhD vest by Yours Truly. So this is my own pattern, which I've had published since more than a year ago, and I'm knitting this for my friend who's about to pass his PhD viva. So he just submitted his thesis. He's a friend of mine from the same department where I'm doing my PhD as well, and he requested that I knit this PhD vest for him so that he can wear it for the day that he's defending his thesis. And so this is really touching and really exciting. He's the first of my cohort of about 5 people who is submitting their thesis. So it's also quite exciting for me and the other people in my cohort as well to see the first person, fly off the nest. And so, yeah, I was more than happy to knit this PhD vest for him. The vest is not really like an intensive project. It can be done quite quickly. And I also managed to buy the yarn when it was discounted. So it was also quite an inexpensive project for me to knit up and later gift. So the yarn is Drops Lima. If you don't know it, it's a very affordable yarn of 63%, 65% wool and 35% alpaca. It's like a kind of a true DK weight yarn. I'm knitting this pattern in 4.5mm needles as is recommended in the pattern. I did obviously do a gauge swatch to check that I had the right gauge tension. But yeah, it's been such a smooth sailing. I really love the feel of this yarn as I'm knitting with it. It's very, very smooth and easy to knit with, and I can go quite fast with my knitting using this drop sleema. The color is beautiful. It's the number 5820, which I think is like wine ruby or something like that, wine red. It's much more of like a grape burgundy color rather than a true Bordeaux, which looked a little bit different on the website pictures when I bought this on Wool Warehouse. So when I initially received this, I was a bit worried that it was a bit different from what my friend had been expecting, and so I might have to get another yarn. But he was like, no, I'm happy with this. This is really nice. So yeah, I've been knitting on this for the past 3-4 weeks, I think, and it's going really, really fast. I feel like I've barely knitted on this and it's already kind of almost at the end. So as you can see, I'm done with the left armholes ribbing here, which I wanted to do the ribbing of like the neck and the armholes before I finished the body, just to give it a bit more structure, so that when I look at the length, this is more accurate, because the ribbon tends to kind of hoist everything up a little bit and give it a bit more structure. And yeah, I'm about to finish the one on the right. I'm literally done knitting on this and I just need to do the Italian bind off. I will do this after I'm done filming this video. But yeah, I don't really have much to say. I mean, it's a bit difficult to talk about your own pattern, I suppose, because yeah, like you're used to it because it's your own creation, so it's a bit difficult to pick at it. And like yeah, it's a bit difficult to kind of pick at it because you know exactly what you meant, right? You are in the head of the person who wrote the pattern because it is you. But I did notice that in my pattern originally I had said on the armhole edges and for the v-neck to pick up 1 stitch per row. I decided to reduce that to 3 stitches per 4 rows, just to cinch in the armhole a little bit more, because I thought that with the drop sleema, which is 35% alpaca, I think over time it might stretch out quite a bit, so I didn't want the armholes to be quite gapey here, so that's why I thought it might be good to reduce the stitch picking rate, so that yeah, I just cinch it in a little bit more and avoid that gaping look over time. I think for men you have to make your patterns a lot longer, so I did buy quite a bit of yarn to account for that, and it's not going to have the same amount of positive ease on him as it does on what the pattern suggests. So I picked something that has about 15 to 20 centimeters of positive ease on my friend. So I hope that, well, his Viva is in like 2 or 3 weeks, so I better be done by the time I film the next podcast episode. But I'll make sure to include some pictures with his permission of him wearing the PhD vest when he's done with his Viva, which is so exciting. The last work in progress I'm going to talk about today is my balloon sweater by Petite Knit, and I'm knitting this up in Knitting for Olive Merino and Soft Silk Mohair in the color petroleum green for both of them. This is so beautiful, and you might also have seen this in my life as a PhD student and knitter vlog. But since filming that vlog, I mentioned at the end of that vlog that I had finished the body, and I am now moved on to the left sleeve. So I have to do, I think I've got about 20 centimeters of the sleeve done now, and I have to do another 16 centimeters or so before I start doing some very rapid decreases and then a long cuff to basically shape that balloon sweater look with the balloon sleeves. So it's quite exciting. I'm quite excited to get to the bit where you do the really rapid increases so you can finally see the shape of it start to come out, because right now it's just like no decreases, no shaping, just stockinette tube sleeve. You might notice that the sleeve is kind of sticking out a bit weirdly from the jumper. So this is something that I've mentioned in the vlog as well. This pattern is from 2019, I think from the earlier days of Petite Knit Corporation, or earlier days of her journey as a designer. And so I've noticed that the pattern had a few kind of faults, or not faults, but like bits that could have been probably described a little bit better. And certainly they are. If you look at more recent patterns of Petite Knit, they're very, very high quality, and I think they include just the right amount of details. Whereas this one, which is a bit older, I felt like there were some bits where it could have done with a few more details. And so another thing that kind of points towards the fact that this is quite an old pattern is that I feel like this sleeve could have done with some German short row shaping. So usually when you have a drop shoulder construction with like a sloped edge for the shoulders like this, you usually have short rows so that the sleeves mimic the slope of the drop shoulder look. So it wouldn't be sticking out like this. It will be kind of, if I can fold it like this, it will be shaped so that it follows the line of the shoulder as this basically. So you make the short row so that if you tilt the sleeve this way, so it has a kind of a more natural line in the fabric that you make. But here, as you can see, this because there's no German short row shaping for the sleeve, it just kind of sticks out perpendicular to the rest of the body. And so I feel like with that, you might end up with a bit of bulging of the fabric around the armpit here, which I think it's something that I could have easily added myself, but I just didn't really notice. I'm sure it's going to look fine in the end, but that's the sort of kind of small but important details that I feel Petite Knit has since been much better at including in her patterns. So I know that, for example, the Ingrid sweater has a lot of short row shaping, including some in the arms, and I know that some people kind of find that pattern a bit complicated because of the amount of short row shaping in the pattern, but it's like a very good designing detail that I feel like could have also been included in this pattern. So just beware, and it's also, I think, a very easy modification to do if you were so inclined to add some short row shaping in this sleeve construction. So that's like my one kind of criticism of this pattern, but I feel like it's also a testament as to how much Petite Knit has grown as a designer as well over the years. I mean, 2019 was, after all, 7 years ago. Oh my goodness. Yeah, 2019 was 7 years ago, and so I feel like in the 7 years she's definitely grown as a designer, and the patterns that you see nowadays are definitely of a much higher quality, I feel, than this one from 2019. Still a good pattern, but less detail oriented and a bit more kind of to your own devices type of writing. So I'm actually quite close to finishing this jumper, which is kind of crazy, and I really hope that I can finish it soon because, as I mentioned, we're having quite a warm end of winter. It's already reaching 10 degrees, and usually at this time of the year I feel like it's typically maximum 7-8 degrees. And so I hope I get to finish this before the proper cold days are over so that I can still get to wear it, because obviously with the high collar, the high mock neck collar, it's going to be difficult to wear this in a warm spring day, for example. Anyway, making good progress on this, and the color is so beautiful. The yarn is such a delight to work with. I've got it right here. I've got 2 new balls right here, and these are actually my last 2 balls of each. I feel like I'm gonna have enough yarn, I hope, because I feel like I've still got quite a decent amount of this and not that much to go until I'm done with my sleeve. So I feel like this will be enough to finish this one sleeve and then this to finish the other sleeve. It's such a beautiful yarn. I also picked this up in Denmark. On the same trip I picked up the Hjelholt Handvice yarn for the sweater number 23. So yeah, it's really nice to be knitting up these yarns, which I bought almost 2 years ago. Oops. Speaking of yarn, let's talk about some acquisitions and future plans. Whilst I was doing my little swatches for the Derm Natural Juliette for the Sirena Sweater, I decided to also swatch a few swatches for future plans. I've got like mohair on my nose. I think the next project I want to cast on when I'm done with my balloon sweater, which is like a stockinette project, is another stockinette project. So clearly I'm in a bit of a beige era at the moment. So this is also yarn that I've also had for a very long time. It's a swatch that I made with Drops Daisy and Drops Kit Silk held together. I bought these colors. They're both the marzipan colors, and I bought them, I think, when they were having a sale. Except when I bought them, I did not buy enough of the Daisy, not even for like a regular kind of small cropped sweater. So I had to repurchase some yarns to make sure that I had enough. And obviously, because it's been quite a while, they're from different dye lots, and I don't know if you can tell whether they are ever so slightly different in color. This one is slightly darker than this one. I feel like you can barely tell. I think in some lights I can see it, that this is a little bit lighter than this one, but I think in a jumper, especially with the mohair held together, you really wouldn't be able to tell. I'm still going to use the old dye lot for the collar and the cuffs, just to make sure that if there is any difference that is noticeable, at least it's on the ribbing, and so it's not too bad. But yeah, I don't think there's too much of a difference that it will make such a stark contrast on my jumper. And same thing with the... can you even tell there's a difference? These two are technically also from a different dialogue, but I don't think you could tell there's any difference between the two. So yeah, these are Drops Kid Silk and Drops Daisy. And so actually, for once, I let my swatch decide what I was gonna do. So initially, if you remember from my autumn winter knitting plans, I said I would like to make a cardigan number 9 by My Favorite Things Knitwear. Cardigan number 9 is the one with the lovely saddle shoulder and the toggle buttons for the buttoning and the cardigan. That one has a 16 stitch gauge. I was also contemplating knitting a lace pullover, and that has an 18 stitch gauge. And then I also have the pattern for the Sonia sweater, which is a 17 stitch gauge. So I was like, okay, I'm gonna let my gauge swatch decide what I'm gonna do. So I just knitted my gauge swatch with 5mm needles, which is what all 3 of these patterns was recommended in needle size. And I ended up with a 17 stitch gauge. Therefore, I'm gonna knit a Sonia sweater as soon as I'm done with my balloon sweater. So yeah, it's looking really nice. I think like a crew neck beige jumper like this will be such a useful staple in my wardrobe, and the swatch is also super soft, so I hope that it will be like something that I gravitate towards every day. And yeah, Sonia sweater is a very classic drop shoulder crew neck jumper as well. I think a good alternative to the sweater number 23. I did not want to make sweater number 23 a second time just for like the sleeve issues that I had, as I mentioned earlier. Whereas the Sonia sweater I've knitted once with my best friend, and I really liked that pattern, so I feel like revisiting it again. And then another swatch that I knitted whilst I was in my swatching spree was this one for the Sandro pullover by Knitting with Flem, or Fleminia. It's knitted up in Sandnesgarn Peerkin in the color Jolly Blue, which is number 6046. I mean, this blue is giving me such joy. It's so beautiful, and it's very appropriately called Jolly Blue. And the swatch that came out of it with the Peerkin is beautiful. It's so nice. I feel like it's just light enough to show the detail of the cable without it being too overpowering. I used 4mm needles and then got gauge spot on with those. I was sort of expecting that I'll need 4.5mm needles with this jumper, but turns out she was recommending 4mm and it was just right for Peerkin as well. And yeah, don't know how soon I'll cast this on, probably after I'm done with the Sirena Sweater. But I feel like this will be a really nice transition from winter to spring, because I feel like this color is it's giving a lot of life, and I feel like this color is very joyful, and so I think it would be very appropriate transition from winter to spring. So when I ordered the extra balls of the Drops Daisy and Drops Kid Silk to make up the right meters for Sonia sweater, I also grabbed a bottle of Ucallan wool wash, which I'm a bit ashamed to say that I never actually used a proper lanolin wool wash before. I've only used like the store-bought hand wash wool wash detergents that you're supposed to kind of like rinse out, and they're just regular traditional fabric wash, but that is more delicate for wool. But they don't contain lanolin, which is kind of the conditioning aspect. So lanolin enriched wool wash is supposed to be better for your wool garments because it has kind of like a conditioning protective effect. But that's why you don't rinse it once you've soaked your garment in water with a little bit of this, because you want to keep the lanolin. It's like a leave-in conditioner for your hair, basically. I picked up the color jasmine, I picked up the scent jasmine, which smells so nice. Although I ordered a 100ml bottle, right? And I was like, I don't know what I was thinking. Like 100ml is small. It's like airport compliant volume. But when I got this teeny tiny bottle, I was like, oh, this is tiny. But you only need like 5ml, which is like basically less than a cap per wash, so per jumper. So I feel like will do me 20 washes, basically. A quick math right there. So yeah, they sold at a wool warehouse, which is where I ordered my drops from. I didn't realize that wool warehouse had Ucallan, so I'm quite happy with that. And yeah, I'm quite excited to try this out when I do my next block and wash. And then along with that drops and Ucallan order from wool warehouse, I also picked up this Drops Fiesta, which is for a test knit. I'm gonna keep it secret for now, but I'll tell you probably more about it in the next podcast episode. But it's 4 pair of socks, and I feel like they're gonna look really great in this red color. Clearly have something for red. And yeah, it's the color number 12, and I'm quite excited to try this out. It's a DK weight sock yarn, basically, from Drops, which is very affordable. I feel like you can clearly see that I'm like a winter palette gal with all the colors that I've been picking lately. And then the last bit of acquisition that I wanted to share with you today is actually an order from the Yarn Archive. So it's a new online yarn shop here in the UK that is specializing in East Asian yarn brands. So for now, they've only got Japanese yarn brands on the shop when they did a soft launch on the 30th of January. So I really wanted to support the shop, and I also really love the idea of having East Asian yarns more accessible here in the UK, including Japanese ones where I'm from. And so I picked up the Japanese yarn mystery bundle, which is something basically she explained in Instagram, and it says on the listing as well, you get a mix of 5 different balls of yarn, but you don't get to choose which ones. You just say what type of color range that you want. So I think they had neutrals, red-ish colors, and then green, bluish colors. So I clearly went with the blue-green mystery bundle. And so the yarns that I got are, first of all, 2 balls of this Paume organic cotton 100%. And they come in 25-gram balls. And then I also got this really fun Kamina loop, basically like, how do you call this type of yarn? Curly yarn, I don't know. And it's actually a mix of wool and polyester, 82% wool and 18% polyester, and it comes in a 40-gram yarn. I think I've noticed that Japanese yarn brands don't come in a standardized weight. So you might get some balls that are 25 grams. This is 40. I think some of them are 30. So yeah, you just have to bear that in mind when you're buying a sweater quantity, for example, or project quantity. And then this one is Alpanica, which is super soft, and I love the shade of green. It's so nice. This kind of emerald green color. I don't know how I will be able to tolerate this because I'm not too good at tolerating alpaca, and it is 50% alpaca and 50% wool for a 30-gram ball. The shade is so beautiful, so I might be tempted to make some tiny penny gloves with this ball of yarn. And then the last one I got was this really fun one. It's a paper yarn, which is, I think, really good for crocheted accessories. Like I've seen a lot of projects using this type of yarn to make a bag or tote bag or something. And so this is, made out of paper, basically. Still trying to decide what I'm going to do with one ball of this, but I thought it was quite fun to have this. This is a 30-gram ball with 77 meters, and I think the recommended needle sizes, they've got different needle sizing systems to the UK or Europe, so I'm not exactly sure what needle size I'm supposed to use, what crochet hook size I'm supposed to use. But yeah, I thought it was really fun to order this mystery bundle, and it was quite exciting when I opened the yarn, the package, and I got these lovely yarns. And I also got this set of stitch markers, and this is a Yarn Archive original, and they are, I dropped all my stitch markers. They are ample stitch markers with numbers on them, so that it's really useful for when you're doing, for example, sleeve increases or raglan stuff. You could change the beginning of round to be one of these numbers, or you put a stitch marker whenever you've done a decrease for the sleeve shaping, for example. I thought this was super cute and useful, so I grabbed a bag of these in the color white. They also come in a blue color where the background of the numbers are blue. So this is quite a lot of stuff to go through, and I hope you enjoyed this podcast episode. So now to talk about the giveaway. So to thank you all for 2,000 subscribers, I wanted to pick out 2 of you in the comments and gift you a pattern of your choice. So the rules of the giveaway are: make sure you are subscribed to this channel and leave a comment down below, anything you want, whether to say which pattern you're thinking of or which, project that you're working on at the moment. And I'll pick out 2 people at random from the comments so that I can gift you a pattern of your choice on Ravelry. So you have to also make sure that you are using, you have a Ravelry account to participate in this giveaway. So this is just a very kind of small way of saying thank you for 2,000 subscribers, and a big thank you for all your support throughout the beginning of this channel, basically. And as a small way of saying thank you for your support in this channel through my podcasts and various little vlogs, I will announce the winners of the giveaway in the next podcast episode, but I will not be getting in touch with you. So make sure that if someone's trying to get in touch with you, you avoid them, because that's a scam. Once the winners are announced in the next podcast episode, you will be getting in touch with me so I can arrange the pattern gifting, but make sure you don't engage with anyone trying to impersonate me saying that you've won the giveaway, because that's not me. Even though the knitting community on YouTube is very wholesome, I've heard that there's been quite a few giveaway scams from people trying to impersonate the knitting content creators who are doing giveaways. So just bear that in mind and make sure that if someone's trying to contact you regarding this giveaway, then know that it wasn't me. You will have to get in touch with me if I've announced you as a winner. So all this to say, thank you so much for watching until the end, and I hope you enjoyed today's podcast episode. And yeah, make sure you leave a comment down below to participate in the giveaway, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!